Hello, my friend. Welcome back to Storyline English. I'm so glad you could join me in our quiet space today. Take a deep, gentle breath and let your imagination take the wheel. Now, let's travel back to a time when the streets of Moscow were cold and gray, when candles burned low in small, dark rooms, and when one young boy sat quietly in a corner and read. He read everything. He listened to every story, and those stories changed him forever. His name was Fyodor Dostoevsky, and his journey from a poor hospital yard in Moscow to the frozen prisons of Siberia and then to the bright lights of European literature is one of the most powerful stories in all of human history. So take a slow breath, get comfortable, and listen. Because this is not just a story about a writer. This is a story about pain, about darkness, and about what it means to be truly human. And perhaps it is a story about you, too. Before we begin, a small gift for you as an English learner. Every word in this story is chosen carefully. If something is new, don't worry. Just listen. Let the story carry you. Understanding comes slowly, like a warm light in a dark room. Now, let us begin. Moscow in the year 1821 was not a beautiful city for poor people. The streets were dirty. The winters were long and painful. And in a small, narrow building on the edge of the city, a building attached to a hospital for the very poor, a boy was born. His name was Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky. His father was a doctor, not a rich doctor, a tired, strict, serious man who worked every day in that gray hospital. His mother was gentle and kind, and she read to her children every night before sleep. There were many children in that small apartment. They lived close together in little rooms with thin walls. They could hear the sick people in the hospital. They could hear crying at night. Fyodor grew up surrounded by pain, not his own pain, but the pain of others. And without knowing it, that pain became part of him. It entered his ears, his eyes, his heart. It became the soil in which his great stories would later grow. From a very young age, Fyodor loved stories. His mother read the Bible to him. She read Russian folk tales. She read stories of adventure and mystery. And young Fyodor listened with wide, serious eyes. He did not play much like other boys. He preferred to sit quietly and think. His older brother, Mikhail, was his closest friend, and together they shared a love of reading and dreaming. But even in those quiet, early years, there was something different about Fyodor, something deep and searching in his eyes, as if he was always looking for an answer to a question no one had asked yet. What was that question? We will find out slowly. Life in the Dostoevsky home was not easy. The father, Mikhail Andreevich, was a man of rules. He believed in hard work and discipline. He was not a cruel man, but he was not a warm man either. He gave his children education, food, and shelter, but he did not give them much softness. The mother, Maria Fyodorovna, was different. She was the warmth of the house. She was the one who told stories, who sang, who listened. Fyodor loved her deeply, And when she became sick with a long, slow illness, something changed inside the young boy. He watched her grow weaker every day. He watched her smile, even in pain. He learned very early that life contains great suffering, and that suffering does not always make sense. Maria Fyodorovna died in 1837. Fyodor was only 15 years old. The loss was enormous. But something quiet and important happened inside him. He did not become hard. He did not become cold. Instead, he became more sensitive, more open to the pain of other people. It was as if his mother's death opened a door in his heart that would never fully close again. That same year, his father sent Fyodor and Mikhail to a military engineering school in St. Petersburg. The boys did not want to go. They wanted to study literature. But the father said no. "Literature is not a career," he said. "Engineering is safe. Engineering is real." So Fyodor packed his small bag, and he went. But inside his bag, hidden between his shirts, were books. Always books. St. Petersburg in the 1830s was a city of contrasts. On one side, grand palaces, golden churches, wide rivers, and powerful people wearing beautiful clothes. On the other side, cramped rooms, hungry faces, cold streets, and workers who had nothing. Fyodor Dostoevsky arrived in this city as a young man of 15. He was small, pale, and serious. He did not fit easily into the loud world of the military school. He was not interested in weapons or engineering. He was interested in people. He watched his classmates carefully. He noticed the ones who were sad, the ones who pretended to be happy, the ones who hid their real feelings behind loud laughter. And at night, alone in his small room, he wrote. He wrote letters to his brother Mikhail, long, passionate letters about books, about ideas, about life. He read with a hunger that never stopped. He read Pushkin, Gogol, Schiller, Shakespeare. He read slowly, carefully, as if every word was a small discovery. And slowly, a dream began to take shape inside him. He wanted to write, not just letters, real stories, real characters, real human beings on paper, people with fears, secrets, love, and shame. He imagined a world where a poor man, a forgotten man, could be the hero of a story, where the person that society ignored could have a voice. This was a new idea in Russian literature, and Fyodor Dostoevsky decided he would be the one to bring it to life. But first, he had to survive engineering school. In 1844, Fyodor Dostoevsky finished his military training and became an engineer. He worked for exactly 1 year. Then he left. He could not pretend anymore. He needed to write. He sat in his tiny apartment in St. Petersburg, cold, with very little money, often hungry, and he wrote his first novel. He called it Poor Folk. It was a story told through letters between two very poor people, an old man and a young woman. They were kind people. They were lonely people. They tried to help each other with almost nothing. It was a quiet story, full of small moments and deep feeling. Fyodor sent the manuscript, the handwritten pages, to a poet named Nekrasov, who shared it with a famous Russian critic named Vissarion Belinsky. Belinsky read through the night. In the morning, he was excited, more than excited. He said, and this is important, he said that a new great writer had arrived in Russia. Dostoevsky became famous almost immediately. People talked about him at dinner parties. Other writers wanted to meet him. He was invited to literary evenings. For a young man who had been nobody just weeks before, this was extraordinary. He walked through St. Petersburg with his heart full of light. He thought, this is just the beginning. But life, as Dostoevsky would later write many times, is never so simple. And what came next was something no one expected. In the years after Poor Folk, Dostoevsky wrote more stories. Some were praised, some were ignored, but he continued. And during this time, he joined a small group of young men who met in secret. They called themselves the Petrashevsky Circle. They were thinkers, dreamers, readers. They talked about big ideas, freedom, equality, the suffering of poor people, the problems of Russian society. At the time, Russia was ruled by Tsar Nicholas I, a very powerful and very serious man. The Tsar did not like people who had dangerous ideas. He did not like conversations about change. In April of 1849, the police came in the night. They arrested Dostoevsky and many of the other members of the circle. Fyodor was 27 years old. He was taken to the Peter and Paul Fortress, a cold, stone prison in St. Petersburg. He sat in his cell for 8 months. He did not know what would happen to him. He tried to stay calm. He wrote nothing because he had no paper. He only thought. He only waited. And then came December. A winter morning, gray and frozen. The prisoners were taken outside. They were lined up in front of a wall. Soldiers with rifles stood opposite them. Fyodor Dostoevsky looked at the sky. He thought, this is the last morning of my life. The order to fire was given, and then a messenger arrived on horseback. He carried a letter from the Tsar. The execution was a show, a lesson. The sentence was changed. Dostoevsky would not die. He would go to Siberia. Siberia. Even the word feels cold. It is the vast, empty region of eastern Russia, forests without end, rivers that freeze solid, winters that last for months. In December of 1849, Fyodor Dostoevsky began the long journey east by sledge, a kind of sled pulled through the snow. The journey took weeks. When he arrived at the prison camp in Omsk, he entered a world of hard labor, strict rules, and rough men. He wore chains. He worked with his hands. He slept in crowded, dirty barracks. He was not allowed to write. He was not allowed to read very much. He was just a prisoner, a number, a body doing heavy work in the cold. But here is something important to understand, something that would change everything. In that prison, Dostoevsky met the real people of Russia. Not educated people, not writers or thinkers, but criminals, peasants, soldiers, murderers, and thieves. Men who had done terrible things. Men who had suffered terrible things. And instead of being afraid of them, Dostoevsky listened. He watched. He asked quiet questions and listened to long answers. He began to understand something that he could not have learned in any book. He understood that even the darkest person, even a man who had done something unforgivable, still carried something human inside, something real, something that wanted to be seen. This understanding became the foundation of every great novel he would later write. And the journey was not finished yet. 4 years passed. 4 long, cold, painful years in Siberia. And then, in 1854, Dostoevsky was released from the prison camp. He was not free to go home yet. He had to serve as a soldier in the Russian army near the Siberian city of Semipalatinsk. But he could write again. He could read again. And like a man who has been kept from water for too long, he drank deeply. He wrote letters. He wrote notes. He began to plan stories. During this time, he also fell in love. He met a widow named Maria, a kind but unhappy woman. They married. The marriage was not easy. She was often sick, and the relationship was difficult. But Dostoevsky felt something important. He was alive. He had survived. And surviving, he believed, meant something. When he finally returned to St. Petersburg in 1859, 10 years after his arrest, the city had changed. Russia had changed. And Dostoevsky had changed most of all. The young man who had left was gone. In his place stood someone older, wiser, quieter, and much deeper. His face showed everything he had lived through. His eyes were calm but intense, and in his mind, a world of characters was waiting. People he had met in prison, in Siberia, in the army, all waiting to be put on paper. He was 38 years old. He had very little money. His health was not good. He had a condition called epilepsy, which caused sudden and frightening seizures. But none of this stopped him. He sat down at his desk, and he began to write. Before we talk about the great novels, there is one part of Dostoevsky's life that must be told, because it is honest, because it is human, and because it shows us something important about the man behind the masterpieces. Fyodor Dostoevsky had a gambling problem. It was serious. It controlled him. When he visited Europe, cities like Baden-Baden, Wiesbaden, and Geneva, he went to the casinos, and he lost. He lost money he did not have. He borrowed money from friends, from his publisher, from anyone who would give it. He promised to stop. He stopped for a few weeks. Then he went back. He lost again. He wrote desperate letters asking for more money. He felt deep shame. And then he gambled again. This is important to know because it makes Dostoevsky real. He was not a perfect person. He was not a hero in the simple sense. He was a complicated man with great gifts and great weaknesses. And here is something interesting. He wrote a short novel called The Gambler in just 26 days. He dictated it to a young stenographer named Anna Snitkina because he had no time to write it himself. The deadline was real. If he missed it, his publisher would take the rights to all his future work. So he dictated, fast and precise, for 26 days. And Anna wrote every word. Then something unexpected happened. Fyodor Dostoevsky fell in love with Anna. She was 20 years younger. She was calm, organized, and deeply devoted. She said yes. They married in 1867. And slowly, Anna became the anchor that kept this brilliant, troubled ship from sinking completely. With Anna beside him, Dostoevsky found something he had always struggled to find: stability. Not comfort. They were still often very poor, still moving from city to city in Europe, still dealing with his gambling and his debts. But there was a steady presence now, a person who believed in him completely. And in that atmosphere of difficult but real love, the great novels began to arrive. Crime and Punishment came first, published in 1866. It is the story of a young man named Raskolnikov, who believes that some people are above the law, that a truly great person has the right to do what ordinary people cannot. He commits a murder. And then the rest of the novel follows his psychological collapse, his guilt, his pride, his inability to confess, and finally, his very slow and painful journey towards something like peace. The novel is not comfortable. It does not give easy answers, but it is honest in a way that almost no novel had been before. Readers across Russia felt something powerful when they read it. They recognized something in Raskolnikov. Not that they were murderers, but that they knew that dark voice inside a person. That voice which says, maybe I am special. Maybe the rules do not apply to me. Then came The Idiot in 1869. Then Demons. And finally, in the last years of his life, the novel that many consider his greatest, The Brothers Karamazov. Each novel went deeper. Each one asked harder questions. Each one looked into the human soul without flinching, without turning away. To understand Dostoevsky's stories, you must understand one thing. He was not afraid of darkness. Most writers of his time wrote about elegant people in elegant rooms. They wrote about social rules and romantic problems. Dostoevsky wrote about murderers, about people who lost their minds, about desperate poverty, about faith and doubt, about why good people suffer, about why some people choose evil even when they know it is wrong. These were questions he had lived with since childhood, since those nights in the hospital apartment, listening to sick people cry in the dark. He believed that understanding a human being meant looking at everything, not just the beautiful parts, but the broken parts, the shameful parts, the confused and painful parts. He called this the underground, the place inside a person that is dark and honest and strange, the part that we hide from others and sometimes from ourselves. In his short but brilliant novel, Notes from Underground, he created a narrator who is bitter, self-aware, and deeply uncomfortable to read. The narrator talks directly to the reader. He admits things that polite people do not admit. He is not a hero. He is not a villain. He is simply a person. And that honesty, that willingness to be ugly and real, was something new, something shocking, and something that changed literature forever. One of the most important themes in Dostoevsky's life and writing is faith. He believed in God, but his belief was not simple or easy. It was a belief that had been tested by prison, by suffering, by the death of his own child, by the pain he saw all around him. He did not ignore the hard questions. He did not say, God is good, so life is fine. Instead, he looked directly at the hardest question of all. If God exists and is good, why do children suffer? Why do innocent people face pain they did not deserve? In The Brothers Karamazov, one character named Ivan presents this question with full force. He collects stories of children who were hurt, children who were abandoned, children who suffered for no reason. And he says to his brother, "I cannot accept a world built on the suffering of children. Even if there is a heaven at the end, even if everything works out in the final moment, he cannot forgive. He cannot accept." And his brother, Alyosha, a gentle, faithful young man, does not give a simple answer, because there is no simple answer. Dostoevsky does not pretend there is. He just asks the question, deeply, honestly, with great pain. And he leaves it open, because some questions, he believed, are too important to close quickly. And perhaps the journey of living with the question is more important than any fast answer. By the 1870s, Dostoevsky was finally respected. Not rich, never truly rich, but respected. People listened when he spoke. He gave a famous speech in 1880 about the poet Pushkin, and the audience wept. They clapped for a long time. For perhaps the first time in his life, Dostoevsky felt that Russia truly understood him. He was 58 years old. His health was fragile. His lungs were weak. But his mind was still sharp and searching. He worked on The Brothers Karamazov with everything he had. It is a long, dense, magnificent novel about three brothers and their complicated, difficult father. It is about love and rivalry, about faith and doubt, about murder and guilt. It is about the question, what does it mean to be responsible for another person? What do we owe to each other as human beings? He finished the novel in 1880. He said he planned to write a second part, but there was no time. In January of 1881, Fyodor Dostoevsky began to bleed from his lungs. He called Anna to him. He asked her to read from the New Testament, the story of the prodigal son, the one who came home after a long journey. She read to him. He listened with closed eyes. He said, "Remember, I never stopped loving you." And then, on the 9th of February, 1881, Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky died. He was 59 years old. Outside his window, it was winter. The streets of St. Petersburg were quiet and cold. But inside the literary world, something enormous had ended. And at the same time, something enormous had only just begun. After his death, the world slowly began to understand how important Dostoevsky was. His books were translated into many languages. Writers across Europe, and then across the entire world, read him and felt changed. Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, said Dostoevsky was the only psychologist who ever taught him anything. Albert Einstein said he gave him more than any scientist. Writers like Franz Kafka, Albert Camus, and James Joyce all felt his influence in their own work. In the 20th century, a century full of war, genocide, political violence, and deep human suffering, Dostoevsky's questions felt more urgent than ever. Why do people hurt each other? What is evil? Can a person be forgiven? Can a person change? These questions did not come from a comfortable place. They came from a man who had stood in front of a firing squad, who had worn chains in a Siberian prison, who had lost everything and built it back slowly, who had loved badly and loved deeply, who had gambled and failed and tried again, who had held his dying child and asked God, why? And who had then sat down alone at his desk and tried to put the truth of human experience on paper. Not the easy truth, not the polite truth, but the raw, complicated, painful, and sometimes beautiful truth. That is his legacy. That is his gift to all of us. And so, my friend, we have come to the end of this story. Or perhaps just to a resting place. Because a story like Dostoevsky's never truly ends. It continues in every person who reads his books and feels something stir inside them. It continues in every moment when we choose honesty over comfort, when we look at a difficult question instead of turning away. What can we learn from this man's life? Perhaps this, that suffering, as hard as it is, can become wisdom. That the darkest experiences, the prison, the poverty, the loss, do not have to destroy a person. They can open a person. They can make a person see more clearly, feel more deeply, and understand more honestly. Dostoevsky did not have an easy life, but he used that difficult life to create something that will last forever. And for you, dear English learner, there is a message too. You are on your own journey. Perhaps it is not always easy. Perhaps there are moments of doubt when you wonder if you are really making progress, when a word is hard, when a sentence confuses you. But every time you listen to a story like this one, you are doing something powerful. You are training your ear. You are expanding your mind. You are discovering new words, new ideas, new ways of seeing the world. And that is not small. That is enormous. This is Storyline English, a quiet place where stories teach and language grows. Slowly, naturally, like something alive. If this story touched you today, please take a moment to leave a comment below. Tell us what part of Dostoevsky's story stayed with you. Tell us one new English word you learned today. Your voice matters here. And if you want to continue the journey, our next story is already waiting for you. Just press play. We will be here. We always will be. Until next time, my friend, breathe slowly, listen deeply, and never stop learning.